Hello, everyone. My name is Harold Campos, and welcome to the channel. Today, I'm fortunate to have David Burg. David Burg.
Hello. Good to be here.
Great. Thank you, David. So let me start sharing the content. Today, we will be speaking about XML in Azure Logic Apps. Um, you know me, I'm Harold Campos. I'm a principal program manager in the Azure Logic Apps product group that I also oversee BizTalk and host integration server. David, you want to say a little bit about you?
Yes, and I'm David. I'm a principal engineer at Microsoft. I've been here for over 15 years, and I've been with Logic App from day one. So it's been overdue for me to be at Harold's little blog or big blog.
Happy to have you. Happy to have you here, David. Okay, so let me go to the next one. So let's start. This presentation is about XML and Logic Apps. Let's start framing why is XML important. For all of us in the integration space, XML is still relevant, right? So it's widely used across multiple industries. We can go and drill down in each one of the scenarios that we've all been exposed to. There is XML in finance through Swift. There is in healthcare, supply chain, government, legal, and many other industries. And that is something that remains despite the pervasiveness of JSON these days. XML is still around. So, David, can you tell us a little bit about where is it that you've seen more XML in which industries, perhaps?
Well, I would say as a technology, when it works, don't touch it is often the case in integration. And so when Flat5 works, the system is here and we don't touch it. And we change integration, we need to touch with all of those points. So if one place is talking XML, we talk XML, talks JSON today, we talk JSON, talks Flat5, we talk Flat5, all of those we support. And a big part of that is XML, based on the history of how important XML was in 2000 to 2020 to 2020, sorry, 2000 to 2010 era. There was lots of XML, and so they're still around because they work.
Absolutely. And one thing to add is that industries are not really changing. They are not really moving from XML to JSON, right? So it's like JSON is there, right? It's being used by everybody, but it's not that the formats and the standards are changing from XML to JSON, right? Would you say that that is the case?
Yeah, at the time that standards are down, they adopt the best of that time, but then they don't change technology for the sake of changing technology, because that's not the point of a standard. So if a standard has been started based on XML, it continues to be XML. XML is not broken, it's just different.
Thank you, David. So then let's get into how do we support XML in Logic Apps today. We have a number of features that support XML in Logic Apps today, from integration accounts to liquid templates. We will be briefly speaking about each one of them: integration accounts, XML operations, the XML expression function in workflow template, flat file, and B2B protocols and others, and Datamapper capabilities and liquid templates. David, from what you've been working in this space in the Logic Apps team, out of these features, which ones will you say that are the most used or the most common capabilities that you've seen used by the field?
In enterprises, B2B protocols are pretty essential, right? Business to business transactions, so the AS2, X12, VDI, or EDIFACT, Europe and US, so that's a big touch point. SAP is adopted so many places, and often it connects to B2B, right? Because they have B2B in the front, and then they have SAP in the back, and then they have Logic App in the middle. It just makes sense. So it's fairly common as well, especially when they have those systems that are just working and they don't want to change it. They want to continue integrating the same way. So that's a big one. So I would say, in this area of the connectivity is where XML gets in. And then the other aspect are there for the manipulation of XML as you go through, either staying into XML, extracting information for your enrichment, or doing a transform from XML to another format to integrate with a modern endpoint.
Thank you, David. And this also, I think this resonates a lot also with BizTalk server, right? I must say that particularly where I spent more time working with XML was with BizTalk server solutions back in the day, since BizTalk server 2000 to BizTalk server uh, 2020. I think XML, it's a first class citizen in BizTalk server.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So let me
You
get to the next.
if you BizTalk, you XML.
Absolutely, absolutely. So so let's get to the basics then. Let's start with the integration accounts. In Logic Apps, we have the concept of an integration account, a cloud-based container, mostly for B2B scenarios. It provides different. You can store schemas, maps, assemblies, trading partners, agreements, certificates, batch configurations, Rosetta Net PIPs. So I think, as David pointed out, it's ideal and it's needed for B2B scenarios. Also, we have the Logic Apps artifacts available at the Logic App level that allows you to store schemas, maps, and assemblies. So, despite the visible differences, David, what would you say? What would you say that was the purpose of having artifacts only at the Logic Apps level versus a larger integration account? Was it mostly because of the larger B2B scenarios and enablement of these B2B scenarios, or was it just to make sure that also smaller configurations had a solution that allow them to do to work with the schemas, maps, and assemblies at a smaller scale?
Yeah, it's not so much a question of scale, that it's a question of efficiency and speed at the technology level, right? Having the schema, the maps, and the assembly right there in the Logic app itself, where they're going to be loaded and executed for the transforms, the validation, and the extension that you have through the assembly. That was best from a technical perspective to have them with the workflow app itself. While the integration account was making this possible in the consumption space, right, where you have shared execution and you have multi-tenant boundaries, and you have the core of the B2B capabilities there. They are organized in the workflow, but they are not as essential to a question of execution runtime performance to have those. Right? We can retrieve them from the integration account and then catch them in the workflow app. That's fine. We prefer to have the other artifact for the more technology-based integration right there under our thumb to some extent.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. You're spot on. So then let's talk a little bit about the XML operations connector. For some time, we've had the XML operations connector that allowed us to traditionally to do transform XML validation, and we recently added a couple of actions: the XML compose with the schema and the XML parse with the schema. So then we have validation, we have transformation, and we have parse and compose. David was the author. He's the lead developer for the parse and compose action. So can you tell us what challenges are these actions ideal to tackle, David?
They really help you open up the access to XML from your workflow app, have the ability to both compose your XML easily by picking the tokens in the visual designer from the previous step and a different integration step you had before. And when you get an XML, it allows you to extract the content easily and then manipulate it based on those tokens by this visual representation of the content natively into Logic Apps. So pretty much the experience that you love to do with the JSON-based integration now is available with all of the XML content.
This is fantastic, and so with this, we are making sure that customers they have visibility upon all of the data that they exchange, not only JSON data, right? So we are making XML part of by making the XML data available at the parse and compose level. We are making it possible to have complete traceability of the data that is flowing across for the end user that is actually executing the workflow. Um, so this is fantastic. Thank you, David. So let's then in a few minutes we will see how this also not compares but complements the data mapper as well, because we're going to be briefly talking about the data mapper. At the connectors and designer level, besides the SOAP and XPATH built-in action, Logic Apps also protects the non-UTF-8 XML content integrity via base 64 envelope. So tell me, David, was this a design decision from the very beginning when we released the designer and the connectors, or this is something that changed, as we evolved?
The protection and content in an envelope was there fairly early on in Logic App history to allow support of just binary content, but also by extension, any content that would not be natively represented in the underlying JSON, right? Because the JSON has a certain range of character and a certain encoding where it's set in UTF-8. But XML can be any encoding. So especially when you have integration like in Japan with a Japanese code page, you may not want to change your content to turn it into an UTF-8, and to protect that. We have the content envelope that underneath the covers, right, will basically for encode of the content and has a MIME header to say, hey, here's how I'm encoding this so that you can still manipulate it, but not corrupt the content.
That is fantastic. Thank you, David. And this is the XML content is used by customers and supported through a series of connectors. So as we can see here, we provide XML in conversion functions to convert the input to an XML type value, and we also provide an XPath manipulation function. Would you say that customers choose this path? What would be the benefits of choosing this path versus doing the parse/compose for the XML value, the conversion at least?
This is a quick inline. Sorry, this is a quick inline operation. So you can be there, you have an input, you say, hey, I know this is an XML, I know the path to what I want to take, I do XML it, and then I do pick the token exactly where I know they are. Or I compose my XPath, and I'm familiar with the syntax of XPath. I can go query one or more tokens or elements from my XML document. But it doesn't give you that full view, and it's more of a code-based approach rather than a visual approach to the content, which is where the new action shine. Right? So two different approach. We want to access a very small subset, and I programmatically know how to get there, versus I crack open the entire document and I have visual access to all of the elements within.
That is fantastic. Thank you, David. Now let's briefly talk about more advanced scenarios. Let's start with the Datamapper. So, David, you were part of the original team of the Datamapper. We were just talking briefly about the Datamapper. I think it was probably yesterday. One of the things that is key for our customers has always been key in this integration space is mapping, right? In the BizTalk days, we had the BizTalk Mapper, and the BizTalk Mapper was a core component of it is a core component of BizTalk Server. What can you tell us about the focus of this new mapper? Is it to preserve original capabilities? Is it to have a new vision for it? Is it what are your thoughts about how the mapper is evolving over the years?
I think it's a big investment to modernize the Datamapper, which is still essential especially in this message-to-message or message burst type applications, where you have one source format and one target format, and you need to be in control of how you transform that between the two, combine the fields, split them, whatever is the operation that you need to do. And we have a lot of experience from the field, right, from the previous Datamapper, and seeing some of the new format like JSON and try to build a native mapper now is native to those new things. That this is really an any-to-any type of transformation instead of being more of a centered around XSLT, right? While the Datamapper still generate XSLT code in order to run the transform, it's not centered on XSLT. From a user, we start from the user experience instead on how do we what is the experience we want to give them in connecting the dots between the source and the target.
Understood. Thank you, David. So then, yes, so would you say that now JSON is a first-class citizen in this new mapper because of the needs that customers have to deal with these days versus the BizTalk mapper was more XML slash XSLT slash flat file oriented, right?
Right, that was a big starting point for us in that, hey, we realized that in the field customers, they don't do just XML to XML, they do sometimes XML to JSON, sometimes they do JSON to JSON, JSON to XML, sometimes even flat files. That we wanted to have a data mapper that is ready to have that neutral representation of the source schema and the target schema. So a customer can select those two sources that may not be symmetric and still have the same concept of mapping, and then behind that, speak a common language for the runtime in terms of execution based on an engine that we know is reliable.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. Just to mention a few things that are supported by the mapper today. So you can do drag and drop, one-to-one, many-to-one. You don't have to do manual authoring of complex XLT code, which is one of the great benefits that some customers are enjoying are enjoying these days. The any of XML, JSON, or flat file to any of XML, JSON, or flat file formats, as you mentioned, condition, function loops, and everything. We don't really have, well, we have something similar to the functoids. We didn't preserve the functoid name, right, David?
I don't think so. That we kept the name there, but the functions are there. That was decision a little bit later stages than when I was involved, so I cannot speak in too much depth about that.
Thank you, David. Okay, so let's get to the Liquid one. What can you tell us about Liquid? Was this available since the very beginning? What's your experience with Liquid templates, David?
Liquid came a little bit later. It is not something that we naturally saw the Liquid language, but we realized that a lot of customers had engineers who were using that, and it's pretty important, right? Especially in this specific field of sales and so on. And it just makes sense to naturally have that support for enabling engineers based on the technology or meeting them where they are for doing their transform, of presenting some material that is some content and document that is represented for a machine to present it in a way that they can then show in a web page or an email.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. So, so let's get to the next one. What about SOAP? So let's briefly talk about SOAP. To the question of if SOAP is still relevant today, I think when we speak about XML, XSLT, SOAP comes to play, WSDLs, and that's still part of the discussions today because I think at some point we had an internal discussion, and one of the arguments that we brought or that was widely discussed was that it's all about the business value that the solutions provide, right? Legacy is just what we build today. Tomorrow is going to be our legacy. So then we have to preserve that business value. We have to leverage what exists and that provides value to the business that we deliver, right? So SOAP is not an exception. It's been widely adopted between 2000 and 2010, but it's still relevant today. There are multiple BizTalk customers using SOAP. BizTalk Server enabled the reuse and aggregation of existing web services, and it has a strong security model, right? So I think what I've seen a few customers is that they loved SOAP because of the WS security, right? Many governments and financial services entities still leverage WS security for their transactions. Are you seeing the same, David, based on on your exposure to the SOAP protocol / format?
Well, my hands-on experience at the time before Logic App, right? Was when you talked enterprise service, you could not talk without assuming it was SOAP. So it had to be SOAP during that era. And it was a very native way of integrating with BizTalk, bin-based XML, primary XML. You can select another format, but in practice, everybody was doing XML. So the two were really working well together. And Logic App in a little bit the future of BizTalk, right? It just makes sense that we have strong support for SOAP endpoints in Logic App, thanks to our friends at APIM, right, which have this good translation to expose it to REST, and REST is kind of the native approach for Logic App. So all of that has a pretty good synergy, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. You're spot on. And that takes us to, you mentioned API management. SOAP is still, well, is a first-class citizen in Azure Integration Services. And here is where we, as a group, the Logic Apps solutions, we have a strong integration with API management for this SOAP-based scenario to deal with SOAP assets. David and I co-authored one blog entry that we invite you to visit. It's about increasing the business value by integrating SOAP legacy assets with Azure Logic Apps and Azure APIM. I think there are what we tried to do in this blog entry was to drill down in all of the options that customers might have to deal with SOAP and the reasons why some alternatives are proposed. I think one more thing to add here is that there we have an APIM connector that was released, I think, last year. And if you are not using it, we invite you to test it. You will find it in Logic Apps Standard. It's an in-app connector. Would you like to add anything here, Dave?
Yeah, it's a very important capability that sometimes is missed in Logic App. Once you expose your API from APIM, you can connect to that API from Logic App, and it shows as kind of a connector that was built for it. You don't even realize that it's custom, but it bridged the gap between the two in a very natural manner.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. So what about XML and XSD authoring? Well, we spoke about XML. Now, with XML, you have schemas. You have to deal with the schemas. There are three areas that we have identified as critical or relevant for customers dealing with XML. One, XML authoring. The next one, XSD authoring for schemas, and then XPATH capabilities. For XML authoring, we recommend the use of multiple third-party extensions available in VS Code. There is no question that if you go and look for them, you will find them, and you will have plenty of options. For XSD authoring, we recommend using Eclipse. For XSD authoring, you can go to eclipse.org. If you are interested in looking at additional alternatives, please go to Wikipedia and see comparison of XML editors. And for XPATH capabilities, XPATH can be tested with several freely available XPATH testers. We've been asked these questions a number of times, and we feel that there are a lot of alternatives in the market that customers can just use to do this work that is so essential for XML-based solutions. Would you like to add anything here, David?
Well, this reminds us that XML is a standard. It's not specific to Logic App or to Microsoft. It's a very broadly adapted technology, and thus we find plenty of good tools out there, including the extension, as you mentioned, to VS Code, some completely independent platform, but freely available for authoring your schema. And often with the XPath, what you need to do is to test it, or to validate it. The syntax is a little difficult with XPath, so you want to run a few documents through it to your query, make sure that you have it right.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Yes, and yeah, sometimes it's just a little thing in a document, and that can derail your entire solution. It's just a minor thing that you could have prevented if you just tested it, right? But sometimes we overlook it, right, with the heat of the moment. Now, a call to action. We invite you to try out all of our XML capabilities. Please let us know if something does not work, or is broken or if any capability is missing at this link, aka.ms/xml lifecycle. We are really looking forward to hear from you. This is an area where we want to make sure that we make things right. We in the Logic Apps team as a BizTalk server successor, right? We want to make sure that our customers they can enjoy of the same reliability and strength that we had with BizTalk server in this space, and they can grow their solutions, right? They can grow their solutions because we are aspiring to become, the best destination, the best target for BizTalk server customers for the BizTalk server migrations. We are providing guidance as well for BizTalk server migrations. So if you look into our blog, I will be adding the link to our blog that you will find a lot of guidance and in our public docs as well. So please get into this link and then provide feedback as much as you can, as anytime. David, I wanted to ask you if you have anything else to add. I'm really thankful that you have joining me today, to talk about XML and this topic, bringing your expertise and experience. Is there anything else that you would like to add, David?
Yeah, thank you, Harold. Thank you for having me over. I would add that we are very data-driven in our decision-making and our planning. So we are looking at the signals from the survey that our customers respond to. We are looking at feedback from the field, from our sales and cloud solution architect. We are looking at the telemetry of what are the action that customer use. If there is something that fails, we do get a signal. So we have both quantitative and quantitative data that makes us react and drives our day-to-day decision as engineers. Where do we focus? Where do we improve the experience? Where do we see that there is lots of usage, and what would customer want to do? So using functionality, even if you do find something that doesn't work, and let us know. Some of it we will discover by ourselves because we are looking at the service, obsessing over its availability and its quality. But you can also explicitly open a support ticket and let our engineers know when something doesn't quite work the way you need to work. We live and die by the signals that you send us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David, for your time. And thank you for this. And we will be adding a demo. We will do that offline in the interest of time, so you can continue just watching the video at your own pace. Thanks a lot for again for your time, for joining us, and we'll be sharing some additional content very soon for you. Thank you, David.
Thank you. This is David from the Logic App team. Today I'm here to present a small demo about our liquid capabilities and XML support in Logic App. I've created ahead of time a simple but efficient Logic App that takes a request, validates the content, and does a transformation, demonstrate both transformation of XML to JSON as well as transformation of XML to text. So in case the validation doesn't work, we'll share a by request response. This is a step that I always recommend when you take in XML, is to first validate that artifact. You simply need to provide the XML content and the the schema for that XML content. I have pre-prepared the XML schema as well as the liquid transform map. They're all present in the integration account, so we can pick them in a simple dropdown. And then if it succeeds, then I provide a simple HTTP response with both the JSON and the text for that. So let's take a look at a few execution for this Logic App to see how it works. Let's first see if our client is sending us the wrong content, right? We can see that we'll receive successfully, but the XML validation failed. And then we responded back to the caller to say, hey, that is not quite right. In particular, we were saying, hey, the root element of the XML document at this location is an error. It's not declared in the schema. So that allows to quickly fail back to the client and indicate what the problem was. In comparison, let's look at the success run now. Same Logic Apps, this time the XML validation passes, and we are going to execute our transform with liquid that transform an XML payload with a sample customer and order into a JSON document. As you can see, we have JSON now, or you can transform it to text, especially if you want to present something. So this one gives you a text customer report with all of the data neatly formatted thanks to Liquid. And then we can use these outputs from the transform action. Here I'm using it in a simple HTTP response, and we send back that to the client who called. So that's it.
This is great. Thank you so much, David. Just a question for the audience, for the field. This is great. This is fantastic. We have the Datamapper as well. So how will you split the scenarios? Datamapper versus designer experience with parse, compose, and transform and validation and everything.
So with the Datamapper, you really have a full-blown mapping tool where you have all of the input schema, all of the output schema, all kinds of transformation you can do, and you can visually drag and drop and connect the things and so on. With Liquid, especially if you have experience of the Liquid programming language from Shopify, you may already have that skill in-house and you want to use it to prepare, especially for rendering to something that you present in a web page in a different XML or just a markdown format. That you may have engineers be more efficient using Liquid. So it's really a technology play based on what gets you the best value the fastest. If it's XSLT, then go for the Datamapper, or if you want to have the visual approach there. If you have existing experience with Liquid programming language and you're comfortable with it, then go with Liquid.
This is fantastic. Thank you so much, David. This has been this is very thorough. This is very helpful, and I'm sure that the field will appreciate it. Thanks a lot, folks, for joining, and have a great rest of the week. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.